Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Hey, good, Matt. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for coming to talk to me about the cookie apocalypse,
Yeah, let's talk about it.
which is, it's so hot. It's everywhere right now. So, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Madeline with Whym. I head our sales and customer success. Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself really
Yeah,
quick?
hey, I'm Ryan. I'm VP of Engineering here. We build the technologies that we're trying to sell you.
Yes, yes. Ryan knows all of the things, edible or not. But today we are talking about cookies. And I think it's really important because I have a ton of questions. So, like, let's just dive in. I think it's so important to understand all this privacy stuff that's going on and that we're talking about. And what does that mean for the consumers? Because we're all consumers, but what does it also mean for the brand? So, right, I'm just going to ask some questions. I know you have some great answers. So, first questions first. We're hearing about this, it's popping up. People are scared, or aren't they? Do they know what's going on? Does Google know what's going on? So, I'm just going to put myself first in the seat of a consumer. So,
Yeah,
I'm a
let's do it.
consumer. So I come to all these websites and I'm seeing these pop-ups, right? And it's, do you accept the cookies? Reject all, accept all, look at our terms. What the heck does all that mean if I accept or reject? So I'd love to hear that from you.
Sure, yeah. So the cookie apocalypse, as we define it today, is a little bit disconnected from what you just said, even though they sound like they're very similar things. These cookie acceptance forms you're seeing on websites was a move by a legislative effort from Europe first and other places now to try to curb this cookie tracking situation through legislation. So now anybody who's doing business with European companies is required to declare to you that they have cookies tracking you and allow you to decide that you don't want to be tracked by those cookies. That is an independent effort, a legislative effort that is separate from the efforts that are happening at Apple and Google to change the cookie landscape overall. And those changes by Apple and Google are far more effective, way less impactful on the user experience in general, at least way less noticeable by the user. You're not going to actually see these things in real life. You're just going to have different experiences that feel weird to you, but you won't be able to tell obviously that something's going on.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
there's different stories there.
Got it. So just to kind of backtrack, that what I'm talking about is the legislation that was put in place from Europe, and that is cookie tracking. And that's basically tracking my behavior or not, is essentially what that is.
The legislation basically requires every company to inform you that they're tracking you
Got
and
it.
give you an opportunity to opt out.
Okay.
But it didn't actually change the technology in any way. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yep. So then you're saying, so now separately from that, what Apple is doing, that does technically change things. Can you talk a little bit more about what's happening here versus Europe specifically?
Yeah, so there is
Let's talk about like what's happening here and how it can affect, we'll start me as a consumer first. Like, how
got
does
it.
what's happening affect me? If I know nothing about anything, tell me.
All right, so this broader environment of, hey, tracking is creepy, we don't like it, we don't want to be tracked, has sparked a drive inside of bigger companies that have potential ability to impact this, globally, to make moves that will actually reduce the amount of tracking that's happening on the internet. And Google and Apple have two different approaches. Google, the foundations of their company and their original ability to finance themselves also was driven off of a lot of tracking and continues to be a major factor in tracking. So as they go to make their changes, they're being far more careful with the changes they're rolling out as they try on new ideas and then see how the market reacts and then try some other things. They've gone through a number of iterations of attempts and they've thrown away a number of ideas that they thought were good when they thought them up. And then after practice and trial, they've concluded that those ideas were bad and they're continuing to make alterations. On the opposite side of the spectrum, Apple made most of their money not through this mechanism. So they're far more willing to be very aggressive about their changes and very decisive about their changes. And they've already made their changes, at least the most critical ones, in their browser already immediately. They're impactful instantly. Effectively, what Google has done, it's a little more nuanced, and there's a lot of papers you can read about exactly what the individual details are. But they've effectively turned off the ability for any system that isn't provided by the original merchant to the shopper to be able to observe the shopper across websites. So, or even between sessions on the same website. So if a shopper leaves a merchant and comes back to these third parties, that looks like an entirely new person. And there's going to be a cat and mouse game of these tracking technologies trying to figure out how to identify that person anyway. And that cat and mouse game continues, and it has been going on for generations, computer generations, I guess, and will continue to go on. But the whole idea here is that Apple has made a very strong statement, and they're cutting off that tracking capability instantly. It's happening right now. No one can do it.
So obviously the reason why Apple has authority, because that's all the mechanism, or that's all the devices that we're using. So therefore Google, who owns Chrome, has to comply. So they've essentially turned off the ability to track. So if I go to a site, let's just say if I go to Quicksilver, I'm checking, same session, I leave and come back an hour later, I can't see what I previously looked at, or it's not kind of saved within the Chrome extension, is what you're saying.
So Apple has made two changes. Change number one, it affects tracking on the apps themselves. So Apple is not allowing you to identify the same shopper across apps if you were a tracking platform there. Then they made a change to Safari. So anybody using Safari also has this tracking system disabled by default. They have not directly reached into the configuration of Chrome to make any changes there, but they are, they're very much driving forward those kinds of changes. And, with 20+% of the internet already being 100% on Safari, so 20% of the internet usage is happening on Safari. That means 20% of the shoppers at any tracking platform, including Google, are observing they're already governed by these rules. So Google, who owns Chrome and Android devices, they are also trying to make the same changes, but they want to be capable of continuing to run their business. So they're trying to find mitigation strategies that allow them to do how to operate their business and potentially businesses like it, while simultaneously conforming to these new ideas around security.
Got it. So it's not just the devices, but obviously the apps that Apple pushes out and has control over. So what is this all really like? So me as a consumer, I know if I go on a website and I'm looking at a pair of pink shoes, and then I go on Instagram and the pink shoes show up. So that's the kind of connectivity tissue between what this original tracking kind of look like. So with all of these changes, how is that really going to affect the brands and how the brands operate when they can't really they don't know who is liking what product, or they have no sense of who their consumer or potential consumer landscape is? So how is this all really going to affect the brands?
Right. So most brands are not technology companies first, right? They sell a product, they produce a product, they use technology to sell it, right? And so they will usually buy off-the-shelf solutions to help them with their marketing efforts, to help them with their website development, et cetera. They'll hire agencies to do a lot of this work. And the technologies they're using are all hopefully, maybe not all of us, but hopefully we're all watching how the browsers are modifying themselves so that we can then respond to continue to provide services. But what is really clear here is that a tool who says that it can identify that a shopper has visited, brand A and then subsequently brand B and subsequently brand C, is able to tie all that information together. Companies that do that in some form, they are likely going to be less than capable of doing that going forward, or the amount of vision they're going to have about who that person is as they cross websites is going to diminish. In addition, a number of tools that you've installed on your site, let's say you're using Shopify and you're using some third-party extensions to make your cart more interesting, or to do wish lists or those kinds of things, those tools are also going to have a very significant struggle in servicing your shoppers. For instance, in the case of Safari right now, there's a 7-day window in which Safari will just clear away the information that they have stored. And so, or even in particular their identity. So let's say you're storing the information on the server, you won't know that information pertains to this user after 7 days. And so they're clearing away that knowledge frequently. And third-party tools, depending on how they're configured, may either lose that knowledge in 24 hours or up to 7 days. but they are going to have a very hard time keeping this information about who the shopper is over a long period of time.
Got it. So not to talk about why we all think, of course, Whym is at the forefront of avoiding those situations. Do you want to talk a little bit about how Whym is different with our tools?
Sure. Yeah. So now we're getting to some very complicated stuff, but there's a lot of documentation out there about how these browsers are implementing their mitigation strategies for tracking. And one thing that is clear so far, with Safari being the most aggressive player in the space that is used heavily. There's a couple of players who are even more aggressive than Safari, but Safari is the one that we care about really at the moment. When you go through that documentation, they're making it very clear that it is in their interest that a tracking solution, a solution that is able to monitor a shopper from page to page to page, needs to have a first-party relationship with the shopper, that the shopper is investing themselves into, that they are choosing to want this third party involved in their life, that the shopper should be aware that that third party is involved and have a direct relationship with that platform. So Whym is saying, okay, look, it is in the shopper's best interest to provide shoppers with valuable information that actually matters to them. A 50-year-old single guy doesn't need diaper ads, right? And
but correct.
Yeah, and so there is a relationship between what a shopper is willing to share and what they want to get out of sharing that information. And Apple's position so far, and likely the position that Google's heading in as well, is, hey, look, if the shopper has, knows that a company like Whym is involved, that's independent from the merchant, third-party platform that can follow them around, and is okay with it and has indicated they're okay with it, then there are means by which we can use the configuration of our application in the browser to demonstrate that relationship to the browser, and the browser will allow us to keep our information longer.
Got it.
And so, so the big difference between Whym and another platform is that we get in the face of the shopper and say, hey, we're here and we're doing this for you, and we're giving the data that we're collecting back to the shopper for the very first time. There's nobody else out there that is giving that information back to the shopper in a way that the shopper says, okay, yeah, I like this. I would like to keep this relationship going.
Right.
And so that's the real big deal here.
And we interview and speak with countless, both merchants and consumers. And what you said is really powerful. They share what they want because they know they're going to get something that they control out of it. And that
Correct.
really kind of the place that Whym serves in all of this. I want to remember this product. So know this is fully compliant. I'm putting in my information because I actually want to hear from you about this product, which is super powerful to brands because they know it's the highest intent type consumer. I mean, we are helping close the savvy consumers who want to remember it, just they're not maybe ready to buy yet. So it's so important to be able to capture that traffic because that traffic wants to be captured and they're actually in control of it, which is super, super powerful. So
exactly.
So and one more thing I think is so important to touch upon in our industry, people are constantly hearing first party data, third party, first party, third. If you could break them down in an elevator pitch, like just to kind of really bring it on home, how would you kind of describe the main difference, which is a bit about what we just talked about?
Yeah, so a third party is capable of following a shopper across merchants and websites and domains and apps and products and keeping knowledge of the identity of that shopper as they go. That's a third party. A first party is let's say the merchant. The merchant can see what that person is doing when they arrive on their site, but once they leave, they can't continue to monitor that shopper's behavior. So the browsers, especially Safari right now, and Google's saying that this is the direction they're heading, they're very supportive of a first-party tracking relationship, right? Once you land on merchant A's website and you browse around, merchant A should be able to gather some details about what part of their site you're spending your time in and that kind of stuff. But they're not likely to know exactly who you are unless you tell them. So once you say, here's my email address or here's my phone number, then they can say, okay, so the person with this email address, the person with this phone number has been doing all these things and looking at all these products, and can potentially we can make decisions about how to market to them once they've given us their details. If they choose not to give us their details, we're blind to who they are. Apple is saying, we will not leave you completely blind. We'll give you 7 days. So if the person comes back more than once, especially, you might not configure yourself properly. If you configure yourself properly, you'll have 7 days to kind of keep an eye on this individual and see if you can develop a story that might help you close them. But then they shut you off. If that person doesn't come back in 7 days, you lose all that. You no longer will know who they are anymore. So that's Apple's approach. A third party won't even get that. There are strategies they could potentially use to get something approximate to that, but they'd have to behave more like a first party to that shopper if they really want to follow the shopper. And so that's what Whym is really betting on, is that we are a first party relationship with that shopper, and the shopper is choosing to take us around the internet with them from merchant to merchant. It would be as if they had a executive secretary who walked with them into every store because that executive secretary was invited.
Yes.
Right. And then a merchant can call the executive secretary and say, hey, we saw you guys are in the store. We know that you're looking at these kinds of products. What can we do to finish this deal? And the executive secretary can act as a mediator between the shopper and the merchant. And that's kind of the role we want to play. We want to be that secretary that follows you around by your request and mediates with you between the merchant.
Well, and I like how you spoke about following around from merchant to merchant. So Whym is able to do that. It's not just on a merchant site, but it's across. So think of it. And I love how you said executive assistant, personal shopper, however you best view. But they're capturing products that, again, you are telling the brands you want to remember because you want them to remind you in a few days or whatever.
Yes.
As you just said. So it's cool for people to visualize. It is all first party. So that's wonderful, right?
Yeah.
And all of these products that you find from different merchants get stored in the Whym app, which is like a universal wish list of all the things you want to remember from all over the internet, which is super powerful. And then you're right, they're in control of their data. I want to be retargeted on the pink shoe because I'm not ready to buy it now, but I am going to be eventually. But you're right, 50-year-old man might not want to be retargeted on diapers. So it's getting really specific, I think, with the spend of the merchant when they then go to retarget. So you're not wasting so much money on advertising, right? And do you want to talk a little bit about the advertising part of this, since that's a lot of your background previously?
Oh, now we're getting into topics I didn't even think we were going to talk about today. This is good. Okay, let me see if I can jump trains here for my talk about ads. No, this is good. All right, so advertising, the big benefit over the past past decade or so has been that with third-party tracking, a platform like Facebook can know shoppers' behaviors, not just on Facebook's platform, but all over the internet, and then use that information to develop cohorts of user bases that have different interests and those kind of things. And then they won't give merchants the actual list of emails or phone numbers to contact. What they will do is sell the merchant access to contact that person again through the form of an ad over and over and over again. So you're rebuying that customer every time you sell an ad to that customer again, right? And so Facebook has found, in platforms like them, had found historically a way to basically resell you the same list of shoppers over and over and over and over again, just draining your budget. The change that Safari has done and the changes that Google will ultimately have to do is going to make that much harder. Now, Safari has just said it's already off, done. Google's saying, hey, no, there is value to this business. We got to figure out how to make it safer. And so they're still working on those solutions. You're actually probably seeing some of those solutions rolling out slowly over your Chrome browser over the next several months. But it's going to take them probably another year or two or more to really come up with the answers they're looking for. And so you're seeing retargeting solutions. You're seeing other solutions that are they're audience-based, that are no longer working. They're not as effective. they're at least 20% less accurate because they don't have the Safari data anymore, right? And so you're seeing even a lot of platforms just pulling out those features entirely, like, hey, these no longer perform because the data is not as good.
Right.
And they are having some level of crisis right now, trying to figure out how to resolve it. Whym is saying, hey, you know what? There are some good things that came out of that advertising space, but the only answer is to be very upfront with the shopper about what you are doing and giving them an incentive to want to bring you along on the ride. Because when they do that, it's no longer creepy, right? It's okay that your executive secretary knows that you like your coffee a very specific way.
Of course. How wonderful is that?
Yes. But that was an invitation, right? That you said, hey, I want you to know this so that you can make that decision for me again without me having to make it. So that's what Whym's doing, is we are your buddy. We follow you around at your request and developing knowledge about you that you would want us to know.
Right. So it's really this mutual exclusive benefit from both the consumer and the merchant, because we're giving the exact first party data of Madeline, who likes the pink shoe. So you can retarget directly versus getting in this cycle, like you had said, which is incredible. Like they're just reselling the same ad space over and over again. So you're repurchasing the potential customer over and over again, just spending money. And we always say it takes like 56 impressions to maybe eventually close a sale.
Yes.
You can cut through all of that when you know exactly what the person wants, because they want to be followed up with, and you send them a follow-up and then they close the sale. So it's really interesting, everything that's going on. Thank you for explaining all of that and breaking it down. It's interesting to say too, it's not everything is being defined and everything is kind of working itself out. But I think one thing to remember is, as these different bigger beasts of companies are kind of making these rules and breaking things down, 7 days isn't a lot of time for people to do things.
No.
So really nice when you work with a tool, and this isn't like a pitch for Whym, but we're doing this purposely. So when you work with a tool like Whym, that consumer data, they want to remember it, and it is there for 100+ days. So they're able to kind of go back and access it, and the brands have access to that as well. So it's very nice that it isn't being cut off because, a beast is cutting it off. We'll continue to refine it.
We should talk a little bit for a minute. I know we've been going at this for a little bit longer. We should talk for a minute about what is it that Whym actually does, and what do we share and what do we not share, all those kinds of things. So the way that we go to tell the story to anyone that wants to listen about what is Whym, we always start with the question, when you see a product you're thinking about buying, but you choose not to buy it right now, what do you do with that product? And the number one answer we get, first the audience who's listening here, let me pause, let you think about what you do. And now let me tell you what most people do. Most people, what they do is they leave the browser tab open. They take a screenshot. They just let it go away. And if the ad comes up again, they let it resurface. Those that do take screenshots never go back into their screenshots to go find those products again. Almost never. Maybe there's someone out there. There's probably a 1% audience out there somewhere that's like very judicious about their screenshots and use them every day.
I found it.
Leaving all those tabs open ultimately usually doesn't result in anything. People leave carts around the internet, but with this new 7-day limit, those carts are going to start disappearing on you, especially if they're built by technology companies that are servicing these merchants, right? Unless the merchant builds it themselves, there's very little the merchant can do to keep those carts permanent. And so what Whym basically does is say, hey, look, what we originally did was we allowed, every time you visited something and you wanted to remember for later, we were acting more like a wish list where you would select the item and say, yes, I want to save this. Now what we've realized, hey, why make the shopper go through all that effort? If the shopper went through the effort of looking specifically at a product, why don't we just record that? Just remember everything they see passively. It's as if your secretary is looking over your shoulder, watching you as you shop and going, okay, I now know that Mads is interested in those pants, and without you having to actually buy the pants right now, we now know that you're interested in those pants. And then, at any moment you want, you can reopen the Whym app and say, hey, I was looking at pants recently, but I can't remember where. We'll show you all the pants you've been looking at every merchant, and you can, start finding those merchants and those products. Again, It's all passively collected on your behalf. For merchants that have chosen to work with Whym, we will give them aggregate information, not specific user information, but aggregate information about, in general, hey, you think shoppers are coming to your website for products A, B, and C, but in reality, they're coming for products D, E, and F. And then they're ultimately buying product B or something like that. So we're getting intention signals on a more broad level about who these shoppers are. And then if the shopper so chooses to reveal themselves through Whym to the merchant as, hey, I am Mads and this is my phone number because I want to say a 20% discount. In that moment, we're helping collect that or create that relationship and establish it more permanently between the merchant and the shopper so they can communicate. We have ambitions of doing much more than just establishing that relationship, but we at least make that relationship establishment far more simple. You don't have to like type in your phone number over and over and over and over again. You just say, Whym, I'm using Whym and I agree to contact this merchant, and only then does the merchant really know who you are and your specific details.
Right. And I think, yep, going back to what you had said too, which is really powerful, visiting the Whym app when I'm ready to buy and I can see everything in there, that is free advertising, right?
100%. Yeah, you're not paying a dime.
Stop paying a dime because it's living in there. And the really cool thing is we always work as a company to really take out as much friction as possible. Like you had mentioned, your phone number is already in there. You don't have to re-enter it. You don't have to create an account every time you want to say something to your wish list. And then when you're in the Whym app, all you have to do is bring up a pair of pants, click on buy on website, and you're taken right back to the website. So it's cutting out all the nonsense. You're getting free ads as a merchant, and you're just making the shopper experience for the consumer, as we all know, because we use it, it's super addicting, as amazing as possible, because it is that executive assistant or personal shopper that's really with you to the end. Yep. You can organize it within the Whym app. You can share out collections you love. So it is free advertising everywhere for the merchants, which I think is really important to kind of piggyback on.
And where I think I really love about this, I came from the ads world before, and having been a consumer of ads, a lot of the ads I see don't appear to me in the moments I care to want to see them. Right. I know I'm off doing something else, and then this thing's like, but don't you want to buy that surfboard? That like, I'm not ready to buy a surfboard right now. Right now, I'm researching how to do something. And so the timing is always off, and it's almost always uninvited, right? Whereas every time a shopper sees your product inside of Whym again, it's because they clicked a button that said, hey, I'm back in shopper mindset right now. And everything we're showing the shopper are things that they have personally shown interest in already, right? So this is like a reinforcement system of the products that they're interested in. And as the shopper, it's things that I'm interested in, right? So if I take myself in that persona, I am only going to get exposed to things that I have actually really been considering. And potentially down the road, if we know that you're really into a number of pants, we might offer merchants a way to inject another idea of a product for you in there. That's not out the door yet, but that's something we anticipate. You'll opt into that if you're the shopper. But overall, these impressions are of a much higher quality than your average ad because they're timely. They're requested by the shopper. Hey, please show me the things that I want to see. And so they're far more effective at conversion than normal ad would be.
Yes, amazing. That's such a great way to kind of bring it on home. Thank you, Ryan. Do you have anything else?
That's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, we look forward to sharing more topics soon.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so I stopped recording. Okay.
Yeah.